I wanna try and take in all the highs, embrace them for more than a moment's time. I want you, please don't move when I push you away. I know I contradict myself some days, but will you ride the lows with me?
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I am your host, Kristen Sunanta Walker. Our goal is to help discussions about mental health be a regular part of your daily life, no different than discussions about physical health. Mental illness can be a topic of discussion under the umbrella of mental health, along with so many other topics. This show is the original program on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com. Our network of shows are played in over 180 countries and cover more topics under that umbrella than you can possibly imagine. We were talking about mental health long before it became cool and popular to talk about, and thank goodness it has become so popular. We have incredible guests, advocates, patients, experts, people. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy our intro music, a song named Lows, written by Aubrey Toon. You can find her music at www.aubreytoone.com.
That night when I started praying, I cried, will you ride the lows with me? Will you ride the lows with me? When I'm down, my vision gets blurry.
Hi, everybody. Kristen here. I have an amazing show to back up the shows we've been doing with attorneys lately, talking about abuse and survivors of abuse and the legal system. So I have Katie, or Kaytlyn Gillis, but she goes by Katie, who is a psychotherapist and an author. She's also a consultant, and she works with survivors of traumatic relationships, whether that's family or romantic. Katie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This is definitely a really important topic.
Yeah, it is. And I love it's a recent book, Invisible Bruises, How a Better Understanding of the Patterns of Domestic Violence Can Help Survivors Navigate the Legal System. Oh my God, I wish I had this book literally a year and a half ago. Even though I'm in the field and all those things, I still wish I would have had this book. So
yeah, I know so many people say that to me. They're like, oh, I really needed this in like 2017 or 2019.
Right.
So,
or for all the divorce after the pandemic and during the pandemic. Yeah.
Yes.
So tell me why this is well, first of all, I want listeners to hear, what is your website so they can find you?
Okay. So my website is my full legal name. I know the spelling is very, very bizarre. Sorry. Thanks, Mom. But it's www.KaytlynGillis. So KaytlynGillis. And then lcsw.com for licensed clinical social worker. So it's www.KaytlynGillis.lcsw.com.
Fantastic. Good. I want to make sure everybody has that, and they can go to Amazon and anywhere else they want to buy books to get your book. So tell me why this particular road have you taken with, being a psychotherapist?
So it started kind of as a combination. So for my first book, Invisible Bruises, it came out immediately after we're still kind of in the pandemic. It was in mid 2021. And so I had a personal experience with domestic violence. And also I have, I come from a family and a background of having a lot of, abuse and trauma and stuff like that. And so I had an interest in working with survivors of trauma and survivors of family and relationship trauma. And then, of course, I have a lot of, personal history too, as well. And so I found that there was really just a lot of, like a lack of information. A lot of people would say things like, oh, I just go get a protection order, or just go do this. And it just seems like kind of like a quick, all right, just check off a box and that's all you have to do. But once you really navigate the system, and that's why I use the word navigating, because it really is like you're navigating. It's like you need a GPS system to be like, okay, take a right here. And then after 3 lefts, take another right, because you really need almost like a law degree to navigate the legal system. And so I found, as a psychotherapist, as a social worker, and as an advocate, I was working with my clients, and I was like, my gosh, this doesn't even make sense. I mean, I'm a social worker, and I'm literally trained to navigate social systems. And if I can't figure out how to navigate the system, then how the heck are my clients, who are, maybe English isn't their first language, maybe they're people of color, maybe they can't read and write, as well as I can, maybe they're not articulate, maybe they're not privileged like I am. And I kept thinking, if it's hard for me to do this, then how the heck, are people who maybe can't get to the courtroom, or people who can't drive.
Right.
So I just found myself getting so frustrated. So I was like, well, let me just put all the information to help whoever, however I can. So that was the first book that I came up with to help for that.
Yeah, because it's really scary, and you're already in a scary and traumatic situation. You're already dealing with potentially Stockholm syndrome, PTSD,
Yes.
Name the trauma, throw a rock, hit another name for trauma. And then you've got to pull it together, remember every single detail of what happened, and then know which window to go to at the courthouse to file anything. I mean, it's just like, it's like, it's impossible. And if you don't go to an attorney that is forthcoming with this is how it is, this is how it's going to be, then you are literally just thrown out into the ocean, and I hope you can swim. And it's like the deep end, and nobody, and this isn't necessarily a fault of like any one person, it's really a systemic issue. It's everything from the clerk court who's overworked and has, too many things going on, and they can't sit there and explain it to you, to, the judge whose docket is too long, it's a systemic thing. And so, I remember the first time I went through it, I said, wait a second, like, what do you mean I have to come back? I mean, there's, of course, it's state specific, so I don't know how it is in other states, but in Louisiana, you have to come back, in 7 to 14 days, and then come back 90 days later, and then come back a year later. You're constantly having to go back and kind of like reprove that you need it. And so I was with clients who had it denied all the time, just because they didn't have, some kind of documentation, or they didn't have identification, or they didn't fill out the form correctly. And I remember getting so frustrated, like, what do you mean? Like, what does filling out a form have to do with this? Or why do you have to, come back and take off work again? And then, I mean, it was so frustrating for me as an advocate, as a social worker for them. Yeah. And I mean, you find yourself like, okay, there's the trauma of going through it, and then and then additional trauma of going through it for things that if you don't have a guide, you're like, I mean, I navigated this with a family member and was like, it was so I've never in my life been so frustrated. And I've been through a lot. I mean, I had social workers at my school when I was 12 about my dad. I've been through some pretty heavy duty stuff. And I was like, thought I was literally going to need to check into a mental health hospital that I used to take my therapy dog to visit patients. I mean, I was just like, this is nuts.
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember saying to someone, it's like, you need this to be, a part-time or a full-time job. Because the amount of time and effort, just filling out paperwork, going in back and getting the paperwork stamped, going back and appearing in front of the judge. And then you didn't file the correct paperwork. And then you have to go back and have the actual hearing. And then, well, the perpetrator didn't show up. So then you have to go back and have another hearing. And then you have to take off time from work. And by the time your boss, has given you 7 days off of work in the past 30, 60 days, I mean, if you're not in, like, I have clients who are, working in the medical profession and things like that. And they were like, we can't just take off from work. I work at a hospital, working, in surgery. I can't just keep taking off from work. And then I have clients that were like, I wish I had a job to take off of. I don't have a job. I can't afford to come all the way back to this courthouse again and again and again. It definitely is, that's why in my second book, I called it a labyrinth. We've gone from navigating the legal system to navigating the labyrinth. Like it's like a labyrinth of twists and turns and and it's like something you can't get out of. And it feels.
So I mean, I'm trying to think of like, if I'm just taking this a step back, because we know that there's all this stuff that you've got to do when you are broken. And you've got to try to figure out all this minutia when you barely have enough energy to brush your teeth because you're so traumatized.
Oh yeah.
How do you start with a patient, that comes to you and says, this is what's going on, and I don't even know what to do with myself. How do I do this?
So it definitely depends on what it is that they have going on. But if there's someone who already is, they know they're going to be involved in the legal system, maybe they're trying to file a protection order, or maybe they're going through, and I'm using definitely air quotes here, a high conflict divorce, because it's, that's the legal term that they call it, where you're going into some kind of post-separation abuse situation in your divorce. I usually tell people, think of it almost like a project. Like if you're going to be, painting your house, you'll tell yourself, okay, Saturday morning, I'm going to set, between 8 to 10, 8 to 11 to paint my house. It's like the same kind of thing on Saturday morning or whatever morning you have off. Think of it like, okay, I have this project I have to do to compile your paperwork, compile your documentation, and get everything together. So let's say, okay, Thursdays you have off, take from 8 to 11, 5 to 8, whatever, and put everything together, compile all your documentation. And I usually tell people to have everything together, like emails. I know I'm kind of getting, off track here, but like kind of, anything that you, like any documentation that you would need, document everything, like emails, text conversations, things like that. So
that's hard. Yeah. I want to just give anybody props to that, because you already don't want to look at the text messages. You don't want to read the emails. I mean, some people, and I have been in this place too, in different situations where I did want to read every email that was coming in. And then there are times when you're so traumatized that you just don't want to do all that stuff. Yeah, it's exhausting.
I just tell my clients, like, don't read them unless, like, don't read them word for word. If you have someone, like for me, thankfully, I had my mom that I could just forward automatically, and my mom would read it and tell me if there's anything that I needed to pay attention or if it was kind of just like a lot of like mumbo jumbo. And so if it was just mumbo jumbo, print and file, hope you won't need it, but and just but just don't.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah,
you have to pick somebody that knows how to read it. They have to not be stressed about what they're, to the point where they can't function like you are. And I used to look at my mom or whoever at the time for something, and I'd be like, listen, I need you to read it, but I don't want you to have any facial expressions.
Oh yeah.
And
like
and don't make remarks during, like I'd hand something to my ex-husband and he would start reading it, and I'd go, no, the whole point is
that I need to not be affected.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not because you're weak and you can't, it's literally because your system is already on overload.
Like you're already treading water and you need someone to just kind of like, turn the water off for a second. And I always tell people, like, have, if you have like a sister or brother or someone you can send it to, a good friend, either that or just kind of skim it. Don't respond unless there's anything that is, direct attack or anything like that. Don't respond to I call it like the crap, the mumbo jumbo, like the
gaslighting. And the word salad.
Like, oh, I saw you at the pizza place and your sweater was really ugly. Like, that's cool. Don't respond to that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So, can you give us an idea of the process that you go through with someone, and then as you see them, coming out of it, what that's like for you, as you see them, like, blossoming again?
So when people are starting to, it depends on how long, it depends on really what is going on with the person.
Right. Of course.
So when I can see them kind of climbing out of it, I'll notice that they aren't doing things like what I call making up stories. And what I mean by that,
let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what I mean by that is like, so survivors who are involved in usually in relationship trauma, but I mean, I see it in a lot of different traumas too. We do what is really called like making up stories. And what I mean by that is like, we'll see a post on social media and we're like, oh, everyone believes them. Everyone believes that lie. Everyone hates me. Everyone thinks I'm the bad person. People have turned against me. Oh, look, here they are with their new partner. They love them more than they've ever loved me. Maybe it was me. Like, and you all know kind of like what I mean when I say that, like we all kind of have like our stories that we go to, like our go-to self-shaming devices, like that we.
And there's also, I mean, I have to say there's also that magical thinking and making up stories, because that became a tactic. So like if there's Stockholm syndrome as one of the things, then you're making up stories of, oh, well, they probably did that because you're still standing up for them, even though you're traumatized. Oh, well, they probably did that because they had this wrong and they needed to do this, and all that has to stop at some point.
I'll usually notice that my clients will do that when like filling out a protection order. I'll notice that they'll say things like, well, I mean, I think they were just angry. I think it was after a long day at work, and, they're probably just angry.
Right.
I see those things all the time. And I have to work with people and say, don't give it. It's not for you to play judge and jury. Don't make up excuses for them. Just give objective information. And I actually have like a thing that I call it NAP, which is NAP, which is never assess patterns. And don't assess the pattern. Don't try to like diagnose it. Don't try to give any kind of description or any kind of, like reasoning for it and stuff like that, or assessments. Like your job is just to kind of, give the objective story of what it is that happened. And, because we kind of do that in our own head too. We're like, oh, that's it. There was someone else. Everyone else thinks that they're this great person, but maybe everyone thinks it's me. And so I call that kind of like making up stories. Like, tell yourself, no, you don't know that. You don't have that information. We don't have any evidence to support that claim or that story that we're thinking in our head.
Well, I would imagine that there are attorneys that come to you for help or with a client or in those kind of situations. How has that worked for you?
So a lot of times attorneys will come to me and say things like, there's no way that this is really happening like this. Like this client has to be making this up. Like there's no way that someone can be this vengeful. And I mean, the conversations like literally look like that. I mean, it's sometimes it does, but a lot of times the attorney's like, wait a second, this just seems so far-fetched. And I have to kind of talk to them about the things like, that is what's going on. Because what happens is people who haven't been through, post-separation abuse or been through that kind of retaliatory behavior, most people are not going to think that people are capable of just being just malicious and cruel for no reason. Most people are kind of looking for like that explanation, or they're looking for the tit for tat, because like the human mind wants to see that. The human mind wants there to be a tit for tat. It doesn't make sense in our mind. We don't like, as a society, we're not comfortable with someone just being cruel for no reason. And so when it does happen, it is hard for people on the outside who haven't been through it to see that and to believe it and to understand it.
I think that's been the hard part for me. I mean, I've certainly been down the road with therapists that don't get this kind of abuse.
Yes.
And, being in a session and a therapist saying, well, you've taken up 45 minutes talking about this person. Do you think we should take something else? Okay. If any therapist says that to you, get out. They're not a good therapist, nor are they a good therapist for you. Number one, but also the legal system, from paralegals to attorneys, to judges, that just, they don't understand this behavior either.
Yes. And judges really, especially, I think, are probably the number one people who in the legal system who will say things to me like that, like, this doesn't make sense to me. And I don't know, some of it I think is gender. I mean, most judges that I work with are men. And of course, there are many female judges out there, but I don't know if it's like the historical position of privilege, or if it's just their generation. I don't know, but for some
Right.
reason, judges tend to be the person who will say to me, this doesn't make any sense. Even if the attorneys can kind of see what's going on, the judges will say to me, look, I'm sick of, they'll tell me, first of all, don't use the N word, the narcissist word. They're like,
Right.
if someone uses that word in a courtroom, I feel like I've kind of lost them, because that word has been really watered down with social media. And so judges will see people coming in and accuse, like ex-spouses accusing each other of domestic violence and things like that. And, and then there are words that are going through the courts, like parental alienation and things like that. And so judges get really kind of frustrated with accusations of domestic violence. And of course, I can't absolutely speak for all judges, but it is common that they get frustrated with that. And so I always tell my clients, don't assess the patterns. That's kind of what I meant by like the NAP, the NAP. Never assess the pattern. Don't go in and call them an abuser. Say what it is that they're doing. And I know it's hard. It's like, it's hard for us because it does seem victim blaming. It's like, then it's back to that whole, like, you have to prove your abuse kind of thing.
Right. But you do.
You do.
I mean, you are accusing someone of abusing you. So you do have to prove it. I mean, I think we get in such a situation that we're like, but can't you see? And the reality is, no, they can't see. They weren't there. Can't. They're not in it, Yeah, that's true. I've heard from so many attorneys, God, please don't say narcissistic personality disorder. Yeah.
Please don't. And I mean, you can, when you're talking,
I'll write it in my book later about this person, but don't say it in court.
Yes, exactly. Like, I'll tell people, just say it to your attorney. I mean, a private conversation, but in an open courtroom, I mean, it just, because it makes you look like the vindictive one.
Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And exactly. And there's an interesting thing. I mean, every timeline is different, but there are people who will, I mean, I have a girlfriend who, $500,000 later, she's still, it's been 8 years and he is still filing motions and whatever against her. It's just crazy. I mean, the kid is grown up, done, and it's still, so there are people that go to those lengths, and then there are people who are just behaving horribly out of their own pain, and at some point, life does move on.
And that's the thing, it's life does move on, but it's like the person who's filing the motions. I just wish the court would look and be like, okay, who's the one filing all the emotions? If 99 out of 100 motions are filed by Steve, then maybe it's not John who is the one who is not Steve and John. Like let's look at the person who's filed all the motions and the things that they're saying. And we need a better way. We really do. Because that should be happening for 8 years.
Yeah, that's what's interesting. I mean, my girlfriend would say, I have to rush out. I have to leave work early, rush to get across town to pick up my son to see him for the one night a month I get him. And if I'm 2 minutes late because of traffic, my ex is standing out there with a camera phone recording the time and recording me. And that this is going on and on with the same judge, and the same judge keeps allowing this. I just look at her and I don't know what to say.
And it's just so frustrating because, you stand there when you get married, or when you exchange your love for the person, your commitment, and you look into the person's eyes, and you never think that person is going to just maliciously act that in a cruel way like that. Like, to walk, I could never think of walking outside and filming someone who's coming to pick up their child unless the person is acting abusively. I couldn't imagine just trying to harm another person in that way. But there are people who are like that, and we need a way in our courts to identify that. We need a better way.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I know I did have two attorneys on, and they talked about how emotional abuse is illegal here. I thought coercive control was only legal or illegal in the UK. Well, no, it's also trickling into our court system here. But when I say trickling, I mean it's like a trickle. Yeah, it is not happening fast enough.
And it's also it's one thing to say that it's illegal, and then it's another thing to have it actually enforced. Because I mean, it's illegal for me to go 5 miles an hour over, but am I going to get stopped?
Right.
Chances are pretty slim. So like, you know, I is it illegal? Sure. But how is it enforced? Where is it enforced? What happens? You know, is it subjective? So I don't know.
I know it's a trip. I watched a woman on YouTube on the news who had a domestic violence order. And it was after the 14 days or the 7 days, whatever time period it is where she was in California, it was put, you know, that's the temporary. It was actually, he was actually given the order. And I heard her saying on the news, you know, I went no contact. She used every word that we used to not say that is now part of our language, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But she was saying it right after the police came because the man rented a dump truck and slammed it through her lawn into her home.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm thinking, why did it have to go that far before this one? Thank goodness no one was hurt, but why? Why did it have to go that far?
It usually does too. It usually has to be physical before any kind of action. Not all the time, but usually in my experience, it's only when it's physical. Is there any kind of like protection order or anything like that? Either threats or things like that. And then when it gets physical, a lot of times, you know, the court officials will say, well, what did we miss? You know, what signs did we miss?
What signs did we miss? Exactly. I mean, well, let's see. Did you miss when I sent in the video footage at a local grocery store where they blocked me, where they were stalking me and then blocked me in the aisles? Yeah, with the shopping cart and prevented me from leaving the store. Like all these little things that they go, oh, well, they didn't touch you.
Yes.
Okay.
Perpetrators really do have more rights to continue instilling psychological abuse than victims have to protect themselves, you know, because they're assumed innocent until proven guilty. And it is very frustrating. It is very frustrating. And that is why, like, a lot of my work with clients is like having to work on being objective when we're talking. Like when you're talking to me, you can vent, you can call them all the names and say all the things. And I want you to. In court, you have to, it's almost like you're reading from a script. You have to talk about it objectively. Like they came and they blocked me in at the grocery store. And they said ABC, and this was April 7th at 4:00. You cannot say, well, maybe it was in the spring or maybe it was April or May.
I know that's the part that's just, and then you get into what I dealt with a family member that's got slight dementia due to old age. I mean, nothing major. So you get into that piece. And I'm telling you, there's a whole thing about predators looking for people who just lost a spouse. So they probably have some money coming to them. But they're, you know, that's not every case, of course, but a lot that can be the case. And then
they're vulnerable. They're
vulnerable because they're grieving their spouse. And it could have been a lovely, happy marriage. And then they get sucked into marrying this new person. And that person really is trying to kill them, either kill their spirit, so that they can take total control over their money, their everything. And it's hard to take someone with dementia who's also in horrible trauma and have them remember at 4:00 on April 7th. They said this. It's almost impossible.
Yes. And so then what ends up happening is that the courts and I always say courts when I mean, you know, like the judges, the attorneys, like all the powers that be, but the courts will say, you know, say things like, well, if you don't remember when it happened, then there's really nothing I can do for you.
Right.
And it is frustrating because it is like all of the, you know, the, what's the word I'm looking for? Like all of the responsibility of proof is on the person to prove
being abused
beyond the shadow of a doubt. You know, and then because what if it was April 7th and instead it was April 6th or something, you know, and it's just,
that's
what's matter.
That's what's bizarre. How do you work with people where I mean, they're having difficulty with memory and they're
Mhm.
because of physical issues going on, but also what happened to them. Because when you're in a relationship with someone like that, they're telling you what your memory is.
Mhm. Yep.
So you
And
don't even trust your own memory anymore. I don't even get how people wind themselves, out of these situations because it's so absolutely
Mhm.
traumatic. And then you're sitting with someone who is enjoying
Yes.
torturing this person even more.
Mhm.
And thank you, court system, for helping me do that.
Mhm. Yeah, because they'll say things like, "Oh, that didn't happen like that. Remember that was cousin Billy who came to the grocery store and did this, or remember we gave your money to this place because you wanted to help that organization, or this is for your own good, honey. Let me put it in this
Yeah.
thing so I can control it." And yeah, and then for some reason, that's how our court system works, that if the person is married or anything like that, then there's they have like the legal right, and it just doesn't make sense. I mean,
It makes you
it's,
never want to get married
yes,
ever.
it makes it, and that's why I always say to people, like, just think about doing a prenup. Like, even
Right.
just why not just do a prenup, because it just doesn't make sense.
Or
You know,
just don't get married.
or just don't
You
get married.
can,
Yes,
there are,
completely.
you can
Yeah.
be together and have a ceremony and all those
Mhm.
things. But man, people don't realize like
I know.
you become one person.
Mm-hmm. And then
You
yeah.
are losing your anonymity. You are becoming one person. All rights are applied to everything you buy,
Mm-hmm.
everything, any money that you might have earned before this marriage that you bring into the marriage. Now they get half of it's
Mm-hmm.
really stunning. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. I just feel like, and I'm sorry who I piss off with this remark, but I I feel like, wow, the patriarchy has really done a number
Yes.
with this whole marriage thing.
Yes. And I was going to agree, because especially for women, because it used to be,
Oh,
for like our grandmothers and our great grandmothers, I mean, there was no way to sit that two women could never be having this conversation. Oh, don't get
right.
married. I mean, absolutely not. And so I'm grateful that we live in a time where we can actually have that conversation and say, hey, maybe I don't want to get married, and we're not shunned socially.
Chastised. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it's very true. It's very true. I mean, it used to be that you had to almost to survive, because what else were you going to do as a woman?
Right.
And I think
Exactly.
so many times there's so many, because I'm looking at my family. I think I'm the only woman in my family who's never been married. And
Good for you.
my I have aunts, mom, grandparents, everything, and and I don't know if I will, and I don't know if I won't, but it
I will
definitely is.
never, yeah, I will never again, ever. I mean, and I'm
Yeah.
not down on marriage. You want to get married, have fun.
Oh, for sure.
I will not do that for myself. I'm
Mhm.
very much you know what? I did that. I was
Yeah.
young. I
Yeah.
did it. And we lived together for over a decade after we were
Mhm.
divorced. And I
Yeah.
was like, no, we're not getting
Yeah.
remarried. Not,
Yeah.
no,
And then
no,
there are
no,
people
no,
who
no,
do it
no.
3-4 times.
Oh, I can't even. No. That's when you go, you are playing a tape in your head that is created by society and a
Mhm.
societal structure. And you are living in magical thinking if you think that
Mhm.
you are a robot and you are supposed to do that thing.
Mhm.
There are all kinds of
Mhm.
people living all kinds of lives that have, and they never get married. And my God, they are absolutely ecstatic. And there are people who get married who are ecstatic as well. But it's like,
Yeah.
you don't have to, that does not
Yep.
need to be a marker. Need to get married, need to buy a house, need to have a picket
Yep.
fence, need to have 2.5 children, one a boy, one a girl. I mean, that you do not have to do that.
And it's great that we are in a, society and a culture where, like, we can sit there and say that, hey, this is not what I
Yeah.
want to do. Because I mean, I look at my family, but definitely, generations of women who are like, the concept of not getting married, like, it'd be like not mowing your lawn. Like, what do you mean? Like, what else am I going to do? Like, it was like you
Right.
had to in the 60s and 70s and even, 80s. And and before it just was like, well, what else, I have to, I'm a single woman. I can't not get
That's
married.
a marker in life.
Yeah. I think it's like ingrained in us, like generations of women having to do that, generations of people having to do that. It really is ingrained in us. And so it definitely puts us in a vulnerable position to be, like what you were saying about the people who are older and they're having, cognitive decline, but even people who are, declining, their memory and they're cognitively declining, but it's like they still have that ingrained in them, like, okay, get married, or
right.
I meet someone who I like and I should get married. And it just definitely puts them in a vulnerable position.
Yeah, it really does. I understand the pros for financial and other things, but you can make those things that marriage gives you. You can do a lot of those things, not all of them, which is, I know why it was important for the LGBTQI plus community to have marriage protections. I get it. I'm all for that. But I also see not in that situation that you can do many of the things that marriage gives you protection for. You can do that in a domestic partnership if you have a good lawyer. You can make those kinds of things. It's you don't have to make it legal. But anyway, that's a whole other and I'm on a tangent about that. But how nice is it for you to, because I asked this of the attorneys I had on, or at least one of them I did, things get awful.
Yeah.
The worst. That is why divorce is that's why you don't get married. Then you don't have to deal with divorce. Anyway, moving on.
It's not the marriage we're scared of. We always, audience.
It's the divorce. Yeah.
Yes.
But when you have a client and that you just can't even, it's another one for the memory banks of how awful things got for them. And they somehow, with your help and with hopefully a good attorney and whatever, they get through it and they keep going to counseling and you see them blossom into a new life, and not a new life of, now they're on the rebound and marrying another one, just like the one they left. No, like really you see them. They did the work, the painstaking work. And how good is that for you? Like, how great do you feel when you're like, oh my God, this person is really like, wow, they put the work in and they are shining.
So it's great for me. Like when I see almost, the connections being made, it's almost like, so much of therapy, I say is, it's on another level. It's not like you could see, of course, neurons firing in a person's head, but it's like a spiritual, like I can feel that they're like making connections of things that we had talked about. And, and they'll say things like, I'll notice that, they're not as worried, their partner's going away for the weekend and they're not, home wringing their hands and all worried. It's like they're able to, do what they want and they're
not crawling to your office.
Yeah.
And they're showing up maybe with some new clothes on. Yeah.
And then the biggest thing that I always am so proud of my clients about is when they start dating again and they're able to recognize red flags, because a lot of times, I tell my clients that the things that eventually make you leave are usually the things that, that were the red flags in the beginning, and not all the time, but a lot of times clients will look back and be like, I remember them doing this in the beginning and I thought that they were just angry, or I thought it was just a one-time thing, or people told me about XYZ, but I thought that maybe that was just their experience. And we want to give people the benefit of the doubt because we would want people to give us the benefit of the doubt because we're all imperfect. But when my clients are able to have a, like a red flag, like they're able to say, oh, this is what happened. And I just, decided I don't need to go on another date with them. I'm so proud of them, because so many survivors got to be this way because, they were like, oh, well, maybe it's just one time and not all the time. I mean, I know that in some ways that kind of sounds victim blaming, but, as a survivor, and I know many of us, have had experiences that have kind of opened us up to this situation, have opened us up to why did we ignore the red flags, and why did we not think we could do any better, or did we think that they would change, and it's almost like the Maya Angelou quote, like when someone shows you how they are, believe them or shows you who
Believe
they are,
them.
believe them the first time. And when my clients will do that, when they'll believe the person, then they'll see their red flag, and I get so proud of them. So proud of them, because it means that they're developing that self-confidence and that self-esteem to know that you're still a good person and you're still going to be okay in life, even if this one doesn't work out.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's got to be, terrifying. How was it for you, going through your own situation while also being a counselor and writing books and everything? Were you kind of like, why am I, what?
So it's interesting because my specialty was, I don't know if I necessarily had, my specialty was, I think, always kind of family trauma, just, because I always knew I gravitated towards survivors of family trauma. But
Right.
when I was going through my own situation, it's interesting because I could look at a client and say, in my head, oh, their partner's abusive, or we would have conversations of like things that I could see, and I could see in other people, but I was in denial about what I was going through myself. And so, having gone through it, I'm able to have the unique experience of seeing it from a clinical perspective and from a personal perspective. It's not just that I've specialized in it from, in a professional sense. It's like, I'm able to look at a client and say, I get it. And I mean, I get it.
I really get it. Like I get
really
it in my bones. Yeah.
Like I get it. I totally get what you're saying and what you're experiencing. And, the jolting awake in the middle of the night because you're scared about the what ifs. Like I've been there. And, and I'm able to tell my clients that, when a lot of the coping skills that I come up with, in my books are things that I've had to develop and things that I've had to work through, years ago. And, working through my own therapist who saved me, and being able to use that to help other people implement the same things for them and their own healing.
Yeah, it's an arduous process. And when people tell you, wise people that really know, like you can tell, you can tell who's just telling you, well, you should just, like you said in the beginning, just get a restraining order, just do this. If I ever want bad advice that means nothing, I just call my ex-husband, who I love, my husband, I call him. I love the man, but I mean, his answer to everything is, well, just call the police and get this, and then everything's going to be, and this, and do this, and everything will be fine. And I'm like, okay, that was not helpful. Why did I even call you?
Yes. My current partner does that now. He'll say things like, oh, just let the police handle it. And I'm like, you live in a world where the police are just going to handle something for you. Whereas
that is not the case.
It's not the case. Like, it's not that easy,
I tell people, think of the pandemic. Okay. Think of it that way. That was more to real life, obviously, than anything else. For me to say to people, okay, I know you're just telling me some pithy comment for me to just go handle something, but let's go to the pandemic. Nobody knew what they were doing.
Yes.
Nobody, from the scientists to the doctors to the police to you, nobody. So I need you to treat this situation like that.
It is just,
and then we'll talk about it.
Because that's exactly how it happened, and it's interesting because, during the pandemic, that's when Invisible Bruises takes place, during the pandemic, during the lockdown, where you'd call, the clerk of courts is what's called here in Louisiana. And like, you call them and they're like, well, they're working from home. So then they're like, okay, well, the person who is on the next shift is going to come on at 8 and she'll call you back. But then she's also working from home. And then, it was like a week would go by, the police were not arresting people because this deadly virus was infiltrating our streets, and they didn't know, they're not going to arrest people for quote unquote, not violent crimes. It was horrible. So that's such a good thing that you brought up. It is just like that, where people were looking at each other like, wait, what do we do?
Exactly. 100%. And that's this situation. And so in some ways it takes a little bit of the sting out of it when you go to talk to a lawyer or someone, because you're looking for someone to rescue you from this horrible situation that you're in. But you have to remember, these are people as well, and they don't know a lot, they don't know, and they're misinformed. And so you really do. I'm glad that you did a guidebook, because if I had read something that told me, or if I had talked to one of the attorneys that I spoke to recently and had on a show, who said, your first choice of attorney, it really take a look at it, because you're attracted to sociopathic people.
Yeah.
And you don't want to hire a pithy attorney that just says, I'm going to handle this. Oh, please. And sort of makes light of of your person. Oh, that spouse, whatever. That's just a blowhard. You don't want an attorney like that. No, you want an attorney that takes it freaking seriously.
That takes it seriously, because so many times, and I get it to an extent, like, attorneys, they're working just like us. They don't want to take work home. They want to go home to their family.
Right.
They got a kid they got to pick up and bring to soccer practice. They have their own fight with their spouse they're dealing with. I get it, but, at the end of the day, they hang it up and they go home, and you're losing sleep and you can't eat because you're
losing your mind. It feels
and you're
like,
losing your mind because your protection order won't go through, because no one will help you, and no one can help you because no one knows how to stop the loopholes that the perpetrator is going through. I mean, it really, that's such a good piece of advice that the lawyer said, like, take a breath. Yeah.
And go talk to the attorney that's the most think about picking the one that's kind of boring and really tells you like it is.
Yeah.
Because they know the court system, they know this, they know. Yeah, that's why books like yours are important. So please tell our listeners again the names of the books you've written. It sounds like you've written more than one. So what are they?
So the first one is Invisible Bruises, how a better understanding of the patterns of domestic violence can help survivors navigate the legal system. And the one that I just published last month is called It's Not High Conflict, It's Post-Separation Abuse. And some air quotes around the high conflict. And those of you who are survivors will understand what I mean. It's when abusers weaponize the courts as a form of retaliation. And both of them are workbooks. The most recent one, It's Not High Conflict, It's Post-Separation Abuse, talks about, what to look for when you're looking for a lawyer. And, a lot of my clients will say to me, should I hire a lawyer or should I do it myself? And I go through some pros and cons, because ultimately it is your decision and I can't give legal advice, but I can give the pros and cons of how each will affect your mental health and how each might make you feel some peace of mind. I love the words that you used, rescue you. A lot of times we are looking for someone to be like, can you take some of this off my shoulders so I can sleep at night? And sometimes that's worth the money. Sometimes you don't have the luxury of being able to decide that. I work with clients who they can't afford it, so they're dealing with the best they can get. So I talk about ways to really navigate the labyrinth of the court system and what it is that you have to go through as a survivor, and and how to deal with the stuff that comes up. Not just what you're dealing with, the crap in the court system, but the crap that you walk home with, like when you walk out of the court for like another protection order that was denied, and you just feel like distraught and defeated. Like, what can you do?
And scared.
Yes. And so scared. And so what can you do in that moment? So I have a lot of tools and stuff like that,
I'm so lucky that I have this platform, that I do this, that I get to interview the people that I do. And I sometimes I get the book that I really needed to read ahead of a situation. And because life is the way it is. Yeah. Sometimes I don't.
Yeah. Sometimes
I wish I would have had your freaking book before this family situation that I played the secondhand anger, the protector of the person going through it. And any kind of guide would have been, but anyway, this is me telling you, listening family, please get the book, because it'll help you. Even if you're like halfway through, get it anyway.
Even if you're in the middle, because I talk about ways to like, using finances for an example. I talk about, now again, I always have to say that that's not legal advice. So I just have to say that, but I talk about, from personal experience and the experience of being a clinician and support for many of my clients, like how to do things like, change your banking email address so they don't have access to your bank, or how to, like take money and split aside stuff that you can, how to protect yourself the best that you can. while you're going through the situation, doing things like changing passwords, doing things like, packing an overnight bag, doing things like, informing your bank I need to take, my ex-husband, John Smith, off of the account.
Exactly.
Yeah, things like that, because we forget, years later, I've had clients that are like, oh, my ex was able to get into my account because they're the beneficiary of my account because I forgot to take them off, because nobody thinks
right.
So it goes through all that stuff, even if it's halfway through, even if you're at the end of it, it goes through the stuff that might pop up years later. And yeah.
Yep. Oh yeah. I had a friend who forgot that there was an open document on their Google Docs.
Yes.
Open to their ex.
Yes.
And 4 years after everything was said and done, there was still contention, but both remarried, they were dealing with the kids, whatever. The ex got in, found whatever, I don't know what they were doing, but they found the link and were able to get in and ruin a contract that was so important to, so you have to think of the minutia. And this is what I did. I did this with my family. I sat down and I said, what about this? What about this? I went through every single thing, since I'm a tech person, and was like, what else do we need to change? What kind of insurance policies? And I did a lot of, the work. So they didn't have to, because I was trying to keep them from, killing themselves. So through this horrible process. So, and not everybody has someone to help them.
Yes.
I dropped my life to help this person. I literally quit a job, did all kinds of things to get this done, because they were being killed every day, every day in every way. They were losing their will to live, which would have, if they would have gone, on with that, which is what would have made this predator happy. This predator would have we used to say, they're going to drive off, like they just won the grand prize at The Price is Right. RVs, washing machines, money, and they're happy as a clam. Yeah, and legally.
And that's and I know, and it floors me. And that's because it's legal. And so it's like, you have to protect yourself. And you definitely, that's so good that they had you, but you make such a good point. So many people don't have a support person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why we do these podcasts. Oh,
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Kaytee, tell our listeners again, spell it out and everything, because they're going to need to know your website. So tell the listeners your website again.
All right. So it is www. My full name, KaytlyNGillislCSW. So Kaytlyn Gillis, LCSW.com.
Thank you for doing what you do.
Yes. Thank you.
And I venture to say, for anyone that goes off into, spiritual directions, that what happened to you, certainly, I won't say it's why this happened, because that's not for me to say, but it certainly helped you.
Yes.
Do more for your clients. So that's one of those things where you're like, that was horrible. I don't ever want to go through that again, but I'm glad I can put it to good use now.
Yes, and I always say that. And just like what you said, it's like, it's not for survivors. It's not for me to decide for survivors, but for me personally, I do believe that was my life path. And I went through that. I was supposed to go through that to know how to help other people.
Absolutely. It means when you can get enough time and space away from the event, and you've done the work, and you can look back at those things and have, some discernment around, okay. Well, because you could have chosen to give up and not do any of this. I mean, there's always a choice, but the fact that you chose to keep doing this and utilize what happened to help others, that's what we're here for.
Because some days it's easier to give up and just be like, oh, just leave me alone. But I kept telling myself, no, that's what they want me to do.
Exactly. So, anybody that's coming in that's wanting to take your lights out because they don't know how to shine on their own.
Yeah.
That's you're not doing them any favors either.
Because it's not about getting back at them. It's really about helping other people.
Right.
Who are in that, I remember those nights of like scared, and like every light that drives by, every car that drives by, those are the people who I want to help more than, it's not about getting back at, it's not about, it's really helping those people who are in that moment of like, what do I do?
Absolute fear, abject fear of real things, not even if nothing happened.
Oh, absolutely.
The fact that they tell you, that they groom you to think that it's going to happen. That is anyway.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much for covering this topic. It's so important.
Yeah. I wish people, covered it more, but hey, any word there is a good word. So, well, listeners, thank you for tuning in. We will have more in our next episode. And Kaytee, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
But will you ride the low, low, lows with me? Will you ride the low, low, lows with me?
One thing you can always count on at Mental Health News Radio Network and my show is that there will always be dogs around. Why? They are natural healers, excellent for your mental health. The original therapy dog Miles has something to say in just a moment. For now, please check out all of our amazing shows at mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com and all your favorite podcast apps. Until next time, I'm Kristen Sananta Walker, and thank you for listening.
And I can ride the low, low, lows with me. I can ride the low, low, lows with me. Till my vision clears up perfectly. I can ride the low, low, lows with me.
Good boy.